Will Bomier is the Certification Assessment and Research Coordinator with the Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program from MDA. And his main duties are in the development of certification tools and coordination of certifications across the state of Minnesota. He also works directly with producers in the 9-county metro area to complete the certification process on those operations and advises on options for financial assistance. So.
All right, thanks for coming here this morning, and I'll try and keep us on task. I also tend to talk too much. This is one of those things, we're going to talk about opportunities more so than maybe the challenges part. Before I get started, I'll say that there's probably never been a better time coming up in the next few years to try some of these things with some of the new programs. There's probably lots of people in this room that can speak to these programs better than I can. But in the next few years, it does look like there are going to be just a lot of money coming into the state to kind of de-risk and allow you to try some of these practices out, if this works. First, a disclaimer. This is certainly not intended to be an exhaustive list of all the programs out there. This is definitely one of those cases of I know a little bit about a lot. Again, we talked about the timing, but most of these programs and practices can kind of help you de-risk and reduce the expenses associated with what will hopefully be practice adoption, implementation and adoption. It certainly seems to be the time for a bias towards action. So a lot of times it seems like we spend a lot of time talking about things and what would be good to do things. And maybe we've talked about doing an on-farm trial of some of these things, but certainly in the next few years would be the time to finally do some of these things. The other thing I will say is, you're probably, if you are working with producers, maybe you are one of these conservation professionals, or maybe you're a producer that has had one in the past or doesn't have one. I really feel that, you need a conservation professional to kind of help be your coach through this process. So it can be really quickly overwhelming when you start looking at all of the different programs and all of the different funding pools and all of the different practices. So working with someone who can help you sort that out, kind of like the first presentation talked about modes of action with nitrogen and potential loss. The same thing could be said for programs. There might be, 5, 6 different ways that you could help fund your cover crop project or your cover crop practice. Finding the one that makes the most sense for that person's operation can be helped sorted out with that conservation planner. And then many programs do offer extra ranking points if you have an existing conservation plan that you're trying to implement. So getting that plan in place, getting it updated. Maybe you applied for one of these programs in the past and did not get funded. Probably a good time to get that updated and try again with some of these new sources of money that are going to be coming into the state. Who are these people that can help? Many of you are in this audience today are some of these people. Certainly, through the Water Quality Certification Program, we have local folks at the Soil and Water District, and then we have regional certification specialists that can help with that through the certification process. Your local Soil and Water Conservation District / Natural Resources Conservation Service Office is also a good source for those folks. Extension, your crop consultant. Pheasants Forever has a lot of farm bill biologists and precision ag specialists scattered throughout the state. Usually they are associated with either a soil and water district or the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS. And then there's lots of other nonprofit organizations that are kind of branching out, and we'll touch on some of those as we go through the presentation. So I kind of have this broke up into a few different parts, looking at some programs to help with the on-farm research. opportunities. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the state funding that's available to producers across the state. And then we'll talk about some of the local funding, at least the ones that I'm aware of, not that I can cover every single possible local funding source. And then we'll touch briefly on some of the federal programs. So this is available in the southeast part of the state. It is not available statewide, but this is an example of you want to try some of that on-farm research where farmers can partner with a local partner like a soil and water district to try and install on-farm trials, looking at some of those best management practices, maybe some that you will hear about today, maybe ones that you've been thinking about. Kind of help set you up those trials and treatments and blocks, and then help cooperate with those in-season samples that can be collected and then later shared with both the producer, but hopefully others in that area that can be encouraged to adopt some of those practices. The Nutrient Management Initiative is available statewide. This is a great opportunity for you to work with your agronomist. So you do need to kind of partner with your field agronomist and do some trials on nitrogen rates. That's a big one that we've been looking at with our program, and producers that might be reluctant, to use the university recommended nitrogen rates. Looking at adjusting your rate after alfalfa. Maybe you're looking at timing. And then there's all the other projects practices like cover crops, maybe some N placement and P placement for that matter, and then some of those biologicals. Two different categories. They have like a normal trial, which the farmer gets a payment to help with those costs, and so does the crop advisor. And then an advanced trial option, which is a little bit higher. But of course, the work involved with setting that up and getting that done is also higher. Then there's just regular nitrogen rate and timing research trials, which kind of involve measuring the effects of N. This is also across the state, looking at nitrogen use efficiency, net return, and soil nitrates. Some of the other research, just to throw out there that most people are probably familiar with Forever Green, kind of looking at ways to improve winter hardy annual and perennial crops that protect soil and work with our regular kind of annual cropping systems. So they're working on developing, most people are probably most familiar with Kernza, some of the winter camelina, but if you were curious in some of these other crops, how they might fit in your operation or some of the developments that are happening, that's a good resource and a good opportunity. Okay, other organizations that aren't necessarily government related. Practical Farmers of Iowa is now in Minnesota, or has been for a while, but they have a few different programs going on in the state of Minnesota right now. One of them helps kind of producers experiment with adding small grains to an existing rotation. So you can earn up to $20 per acre, and this is anywhere in the state of Minnesota, at least that I'm aware of, that to add barley, oats, cereal rye, wheat, coupled with a cover that might allow you to put a small or a cover crop after that small grain. You are allowed to harvest that small grain for grain or for forage. And then you can earn an additional $20 an acre if you reduce your nitrogen rate on your corn that follows that small grain. So up to $40 an acre, depending on which avenue you want to go. And then they also have a cover crop program. You'll notice that in a lot of these slides. There's a lot of cover crop programs. So this might be an option if you're interested in something that is, outside of a government entity. And I think I've got The best way to contact them, they're still rolling out a lot of this stuff for the upcoming cropping season, is to go to their website, sign up for their newsletter so that you can kind of get in on that, if that's something that might interest you. Pheasants Forever, again, coupled with, they have a precision conservation initiative payment, and this is kind of coupled with Practical Farmers of Iowa, where together they're trying to kind of help producers look at their field, identify low performing acres or underperforming acres where they might actually make more money planting a perennial such as CRP or putting that into a perennial system rather than cropping it every year. They take a look at your yield data, look at all that, and create these maps to kind of identify underperforming areas. Of note on this program, there is no public access required to participate with them in this program. So just because it's Pheasants Forever doesn't mean that you have to open it up to public access. And they do require a 5-year commitment. So in those areas that they identify as underperforming, if you were to, you don't have to put those into CRP, but they do right now have a 5-year commitment of keeping that in a perennial system. So they've kind of take a different approach. So they're not going to pay you for the acres that you put into a perennial or remove for production. They're hoping that you can apply for, maybe a different program like CRP on those acres. They're going to pay you on the acres that remain in production. So depending on what % of the original field kind of stays in production, they'll pay you on those acres. So up to $26 an acre or $10,000 per farmer for the acres that stay in production. So this is kind of a good opportunity if you want to look at some lower producing areas in your field and kind of couple up multiple programs and payment opportunities. Probably works better on if you're looking at a large tract or the whole farm rather than small bits and pieces. State and local funding opportunities. With the Minnesota Water Quality Certification Program, a lot of people are familiar with our financial assistance grant. It's kind of an additive grant that can be coupled with other cost share or funding resources, whether that's federal farm bill funding, local soil and water funding. It is limited to $5,000 with a maximum of 75% cost share. And it is available statewide. Producers that want to qualify or want to sign up for that program have to be certified, or maybe they're working towards certification, so they have an application with us. The nice thing about this program is it is a continuous sign up, so we don't have funding cutoffs or deadlines. If you come in and you want to, you're interested in the program and you want to sign up, we can get you approved. There's no ranking criteria or anything like that. We've been able to fund all these projects. And really it funds any practice, so not equipment, but any practice that has a water quality benefit. So it's pretty adaptive that way. And my advice would be to contact your soil and water district or your regional certification specialist if you're interested in that program. Then I'm just going to touch on this briefly because ours is kind of wrapping up, but you're going to hear a lot about the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, which is a federal program under the Farm Bill. We have a part of that. The Board of Water and Soil Resources, and in conjunction with the Soil and Water Districts, is going to be rolling out a new version of that. It's just a separate funding pool that, again, is available to producers that are working towards certification or are certified. Briefly touch, again, under the certification program, we do have the Farm Business Management Scholarship, which helps folks with tuition. This is also available statewide and with applications for that year due March 1st. Then equipment. So there's not many ways to cover equipment costs. This is the first full year of the soil health financial assistance program or, soil health equipment grant. It covers the purchase of new, used, or retrofit equipment. It's available statewide to producers in the state with awards from $500 to $50,000 at 50% cost share. It's not limited just to producers or individuals, but local government units can also apply. And equipment purchases must advance soil health. So it's important that folks that are interested in this, kind of make the connection between the piece of equipment they want to purchase and the soil health benefits. Briefly, how to apply. Don't wait till the night before the applications are due. You want to put some thought into this, how much it's going to cost, what kind of equipment you want to buy. We just made the awards for this year, so kind of look for that to come out probably in August, which I realize is a busy time for a lot of people. So that's why now might be a good time to kind of check that out, start working on that. I'll very briefly go through the kind of the Ag Best Management Practice Loan Program. I don't think this program is really well known, but it's basically a water quality program that provides low interest loans to farmers and rural landowners, but also supply businesses. And the whole purpose of the program is to kind of help boost best management practices that prevent runoff and provide a water quality benefit. Again, a big wide berth of people that are open, as long as what you want to get a loan for would provide a water quality benefit. So the best way would be, again, to contact your soil and water district, or sometimes the counties through planning and zoning, or the county environmental services office might run this. It can be utilized in conjunction with local, state, or federal funding. So maybe you just need a loan until you get that reimbursement or the payment from the other funding source. It does work with your local bank. So this is kind of a complicated slide that shows that, you need to start kind of with your local soil and water district or the county, find out if the project that you want to do is eligible. Then you need to get approval from the local bank or lender, and then you can proceed with your project. At a time of high interest rates, this is a great opportunity if it's an eligible project. Local funding sources, there's no way I can, with 80 plus soil and water districts in the state, there's no way that I can cover every single program that they have. But many of them have, there's a lot more local funding than there ever used to be. And there's going to be more coming. There's over $25 million in federal funds that's going to be rolling out through the districts to fund soil health programs and practices, many of which are tied to nitrogen management or can be used for nitrogen management. Some of these funding sources can be a lot more flexible than others, and that have been in the past. And I would say now is the time to reach out to the soil and water districts if you haven't already, so you can kind of get lined up for that. This will just take you to, if you're curious where your soil and water district is, that'll help you there. Federal funding opportunities. I think a lot of folks are probably familiar with these, but I'll just briefly cover some of these resources that are available. The Environmental Quality Incentives Program through NRCS is still available. I know that funding has been tough depending on where you are in the state, which projects you want to do in the past, but it does sound like there's going to be a large infusion of money into this program in the next few years, thanks to some of the provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act. It can fund a variety of nitrogen best management practices, and there's a lot of new scenarios and a little bit more flexibility and a lot more options than there was in the past. So, I'm going to briefly, nutrient management plans are still covered in there, but so is some of these residue management if you're interested in no-till or strip-till, cover crops, and nutrient management. And those payment rates vary depending on exactly what you want to do and what you want to try. One of the things that kind of gets, I think, hasn't been talked a lot about at least in the last 15 years or so, is conservation crop rotation. So maybe you just want to add a perennial crop, or maybe you want to add a high residue crop to your basic corn soybean rotation. Or new this year, there's this short-term perennial, which is maybe you want to add a short-term perennial to an existing rotation that hasn't had one for 3 years, like alfalfa. And that payment rate is $52 an acre. Just trying to get people to diversify their existing rotations. Maybe you want to add a small grain or a winter annual to your existing rotation. I've got quite a few, or at least a couple of producers that are really interested in this. Might open up a window for you to also add cover crops. That's something new that they're offering. There's a new lime, amending soil properties with lime if you're in a no-till situation where maybe you've got some issues in the top few inches. Saturated buffers are another option for subsurface drainage treatments. Drainage water management, not widely adopted in the state yet, but that is still eligible for funding. The conservation CSP, or the Conservation Stewardship Program, is another option that just kind of is a whole farm approach. And there's a lot of different kind of nutrient management examples, nitrogen management examples for strategies of things you can implement under that program, whether it's improving nutrient uptake, reducing risk of nitrogen nutrient loss, or uptake efficiency. And there's lots of different kind of options under each one of these scenarios. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk about, I am certainly not a crop insurance expert, but there is a new program that kind of helps with the split nitrogen applications. So they call it the post-application coverage endorsement. So it's an endorsement that goes on to your existing crop insurance policy, and it kind of covers any potential loss that a producer might occur because they can't apply that second nitrogen application due to weather or field conditions. So it's something you would need to talk to your crop insurance agent for details ahead of time if it's something that you might be interested in. But if you're concerned about, again, reducing the risk associated with trying a split application, might be something to look into. Okay, and then I like history, so we probably spent a little bit too much time thinking about history, but I just wanted to close with like old ideas, new ideas. Nutrient management, they've been talking about this for the longest time. The founders were mostly farmers in some way, shape, or form, some other than others. But at the time of the revolution, composting manure was kind of a new thing, at least here in the early United States. John Adams said, you know, manure is an art, and I consider myself an accomplished artist. He wrote a lot to his wife about his composting and about manure and about the neighbor's manure pile, which I find interesting. George Washington, when he was looking for a new farmhand, he was looking for someone who could convert everything he touches into manure. It's the first transformation towards gold, basically. George Washington wrote every Sunday through his 8 years as president back to his farm manager with instructions. And my favorite was one Sunday as the British Navy was sitting outside New York. I think it was New York, and they weren't sure what the morning was going to bring, or the revolution was going to be successful at all. He still took time to go back to where he was staying and dash off a letter about which cover crops they should plant on the farm. So he must have been fairly optimistic. But their big thing, and they talked a lot about crop rotations, was they realized that they did not want what happened in Europe to happen to the United States, which is their soils became exhausted, productivity went way down. So trying to get producers to adopt crop rotations, nutrient management, that was a high priority with all of them throughout their lives. So with that, I'm ahead of schedule, So I'll take any questions that anybody has. So,
Right, wonderful. It's full Slido.
on slide, oh yeah.
Are there any questions? You'd like to type or?
Everybody wants to get to break.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we are ahead of schedule, so we appreciate that. So certainly appreciate the first three speakers this morning with, again, talking about innovations, opportunities to do your own on-farm research, and then resources available to do that here in Minnesota. So here's a question. Oh, excellent overview of all the different programs. Thanks. All right, so that was, appreciate that feedback. All right. If there are no questions, the speakers from this morning are, well, Alan is here. So if you have questions, feel free to ask those questions. We'll take a 10-minute break. So we'll be back at 10:15 in the room. And actually, there is a question here. Is that fund available out of USA?
I don't know which fund. I don't think any of the funding sources that I talked about are available outside.
Okay. All right. So yeah, the funding sources that were mentioned here are not for outside of the US. They're all here local.